Hello, everyone. Welcome to Half-Cooked Ideas, a series of talks about thoughts you are unlikely to hear elsewhere. They will take you through the genesis of the Betweenness Model. It also contains an explanation for the origins of doubt and uncertainty, and it will introduce you to the language and convention, tampering, and meddling effects. Don't worry if you don't understand what I'm talking about. They will be explained in other talks. Enjoy, and I hope my philosophy is of value. So let's check where we stand. We finished the first segment, which is the introductory segment. The following talk falls under the second segment, which is a collection of random arguments and precursor thoughts that eventually led to development of the core fundamentals of cognition and the Betweenness model. After we finish this segment, we'll move to the formal argument segments about the core fundamentals of cognition and about the Betweenness model. The title of this talk is Keeping a Sincere Face is Easier When You Don't Know You Don't Know. Certainty is not possible, but often claimed, and the same can be said of truth. Let's elaborate a little bit. Nearly all, if not all, definitions, codes, classifications, or descriptions, no matter how rigid, well-constructed, detailed, thoughtfully prepared, are practical definitions. They're not absolute definitions. But we choose to carry on accepting them at their face value and for practical reasons. And not seeing their shortcomings inserts a lot of confidence. And from that confidence, we can maintain sincere faces because we choose not to know what we don't know, or we choose to not focus on it. And this has a lot of ramifications. Of course, maintaining a sincere face is a mild level of that results from confidence. But if your confidence in a certain dynamic is excessive, it can lead to things like numerology, where you start believing that numbers have divine and mystical value. And this can actually fool the most intelligent people. Let's take an example. Kako is a brilliant physicist, and he published a book called The God Equation. And this, of course, illustrates that he started believing that physics, equations, and numbers might have divine or mystical value. And I think this stems from not appreciating what I've been preaching in the prior talks about our mental capacity and our cognition and the two core fundamentals that limits us. If he acknowledged that, then it's very unlikely to see completeness, perfection, divinity, or mystical qualities to numbers or physics. And these core fundamental values of cognition and mental, just to reiterate, reaffirm the indirectness of truth and the omnipresent effect of convention and terms, which are everywhere in our mental activity and processes. So let's take a practical example. Think of anything, and X can be anything you think of, and try to define it as X is this or X is that. And we do this throughout our human history. We have these definitions, codes, descriptions, and we define them as this and that. And oftentimes we carry on blissfully saying that is X, or I saw X, or I touched X, or I heard X, and so on. While if you buy into what I've been trying to say, we ought to be saying that is X practically, or that is X in practical terms. But of course we don't. We just say X is X, and we sort of look the other way at the shortfallings of these definitions, descriptions, and codes. Of course, I don't expect everybody to accept what I've been trying to say in this talk. It is a very hard sell for things that are physical, things that you can touch or things that you can visit, or this book, to say that this is a book practically. It's much easier sell for me and for you to buy it for abstract things. But I stand by what I said in a universal, absolute way, that all definitions are practical definitions, even for things that are physical, like this phone. Let's take an abstract and try to do the same line of thinking. Let's take knowing, or even better, let's take knowledge. Knowledge has been defined by humanity in many ways. Regardless of the way it's been defined, we take that definition at face value, and we carry on saying that knowledge is this or that, and that's not knowledge, or this is not knowledge, and so on. Or we can say that he or she is knowledgeable based on that definition. If you buy into what I've been trying to say, we ought to be saying that is knowledge practically, or that is knowledge in practical terms, because the definition of knowledge is a practical definition, not an absolute definition. And it's not a problem to be confident about the definition of knowledge, but and to hold a sincere face, but we should also embrace that these definitions are limited in some way, and be open to improvements and revisions. Of course, some of the listeners might say it's easier to criticize a definition of knowledge without proposing one. For those of you who would like to know about my ideas about knowledge, I have proposed restructuring the definition. You can find it in a book published last year. The book will be available free this Saturday and Sunday, and intermittently on weekends afterwards on Kindle, where I divide knowledge into unconditional, conditional, and pseudo-knowledge, if you're interested. So where does this leave us? I guess in a way, what I'm trying to say is that people have sincere faces and express confidence, and I think that's okay if it stems from trying to be nice or trying to be helpful. But if it stems from conviction, then there's a little bit of ignorance that is involved to actually hold a sincere face and express confidence, especially high confidence, out of conviction, because most of the things that you are relying on are practical definitions, practical classification, practical descriptions, and it's okay to have a sincere face or express confidence out of being practical or being helpful or being nice. But if conviction, especially absolute conviction, is behind it, then ignorance is playing a role. So the relevance of what we spoke about before is that minds are in default ignorance, at least to some extent. And it comes from not acknowledging the two core fundamentals of mental and cognitive activities. The first one is the core that affirms the indirectness of truth. We don't have a direct relationship to truth. The other one is related to conditions that are everywhere mental. And these conditions come with a tax. They're not tax-free, even if we don't acknowledge them, and even if we don't perceive them. So it's not very easy. It's almost impossible to perceive the limitations in defining things that are physical, like this phone. But it is probably easier to find the limitations in defining abstract things. And with that said, let's go back to knowledge. We used it as a poster child before. Let's use it again. We permit ourselves to define the indefinable. Knowledge is one of those things. This is one definition. Knowledge is a familiarity, awareness, or understanding of someone or something, such as facts, descriptive knowledge, skills, procedural knowledge, or objects, acquaintance knowledge. This is one definition of many definitions of knowledge. If you look at it, I don't see a direct anchor to truth. I don't see anything that violates the first core fundamental of our mental activity, which affirms that indirectness of truth, including this definition of knowledge itself. So statements, definitions, descriptions, models are all practical. We live in a conditional existence. Imagining a mental activity or a cognitive activity without conditions or terms is like imagining a zebra without stripes. It's who we are. We cannot be humans without conditions and terms. And we can look the other way for practical reasons. When it comes to actually digging in deep to what we really know, it's probably wiser to understand our limitations. This concludes our talk. Thank you for watching. If you found this interesting, please join us on other talks. And if you think this is valuable, please share with others. Bye-bye. See you later.